What I'm going to do today is cover self-care, because it's such an important subject and somebody brought it up when I came in. One of the things that I do is I do a lot of work for carers in Bromley. There's an organisation called Bromley Carers, which is actually part of Age UK, and I've met probably the most stressed group of individuals I've ever met. Their lives are constricted very deeply by the demands of the person that they care for, and they have no time. They sublimate everything to focus on the well-being of the person that they care for, and so they don't have time for themselves. And what we tend to do is there's a peer support group, and I run a meditation class after the peer support group. We'll be raising the funding for this because they're a charity and they gain all of their funding for everything like this through one big pot, which shrinks as time goes on, and although the demands grow. So as the NHS becomes, and all of the other supporting organisations become more limited, so there's more adult carers just left to fend for themselves, and so they need more support. So their demand grows, but their income reduces. So we'll be doing some fundraising for them. So if anybody's interested in joining the fundraising committee, that's, he said, just dropping it into the conversation. That is but ideally an hour a week, just to help out in some way. Then let me know. Now, having taught these individuals who have very high anxiety and under a great deal of stress from every conceivable source, the thing that benefits them the most out of everything that I teach is a thing called self-compassion. Now, our culture has got a really unhelpful perspective to things like compassion and gratitude. We've got this perception that it's a virtue if we're tough and unemotional. What that actually means is that it's denial of our humanity, literally, because human beings are emotional beings. And so denying emotion, denying things like anxiety, assuming that you're foolish enough to think that you can do it in perpetuity, is, there's a perfect example. It's massively unhelpful. So back in the day, I had what I referred to as a mental dustbin. I actually used that terminology. I had a mental dustbin. And I encountered quite a lot of adversity when I was younger. I had this concept of putting it in the mental dustbin. I'll just park that, put it in a little box, forget about it, and carry on. And because of that, I never processed any of the emotions that went with that. And I also built up a lot of unhealthy beliefs. And right at the top of the unhealthy beliefs was that dustbin was infinite size. No matter what came my way, I could put it in there and I'd be fine. And then one day it overflowed. And I have no doubt that on a long enough timeline, in the modern world, because of all of the stresses on us, and there's a multitude of them, and they're all really unhelpful, on a long enough timeline, everyone burns out. It was only then that I really focused on meditation because I had a need for it. Prior to that, it was a thing that I did, and I use it to help me get to sleep and so on. I was just beginning to learn how useful meditation could be when that event happened and I actually burnt out at work. I couldn't go in one day because I was emotionally overwhelmed as a result of the toxic nature of the place that I was working in. It had all of the ingredients of a toxic workplace. And so that event caused me to focus on my meditation. My meditation helped me to recognize a lot of things, and one of the things I recognized is that gratitude and compassion is actually part of our humanity. You know, not being compassionate to our fellow human beings isn't natural. It's an absurd, cartoon-like aspiration in a world that's largely been constructed by marketing and CEOs. It's not part of our lives. It's natural for us to be compassionate. It's natural for us to want to alleviate the suffering of another living being. So, you know, the little bird with a broken leg in the garden, you're going to want to try to help it, nurse it back to health somehow, or a broken wing or whatever. You want to help it. And what happens is, if we switch off our own compassion towards ourselves, we're able to then switch off compassion to everybody else. And the actual reality of it is, in our modern world, it's sick. The reason it's sick is because most people can ignore the suffering of others, especially if they see that group as the others, the people that have caused their own suffering because they don't believe what I do, they don't think what I do, they don't look like I do. Them, I don't care how much they suffer. Yeah. Reality is, you stop the person in the street, they're a fully signed up member of the not caring about the suffering of others because they deserve it. Yeah? They deserve it because of what they believe or whatever it might happen to be. Yeah? And there's a mountain of this. And actually, you have conversations with people and out it comes, you know. And we need to know the answer to that isn't to turn yourself into a Jesus-like person overnight. It's to notice when it happens. Notice. So I read this book by a trans lady recently, and one of the things that I really learned about the most was this concept of othering. And she had been othered her entire life and is othered now. And it never really clicked. What we also do is we other ourselves. Yeah? If you ever beat yourself up in your head, hands up anybody who never beats themselves up in their head. I've asked that question a million. No one's ever put their hand up. I never beat myself. No one ever. I beat myself up. I learned to beat myself up because my dad used to beat himself up, and then he beat me up. Not physically, but apparently I was a stupid boy. So if he did anything silly, made a mistake or something, the air would be blue, as he could swear really well, like the Merovingian in The Matrix. And if you haven't seen that, it's worth watching The Matrix just to hear the Merovingian scene. And so he used to give himself a really hard time, so I picked that up and I give myself I didn't even realise I was doing it. And each time you do that, you're diminishing yourself. You're diminishing your own needs. And what do we need? It's actually very simple. It's the simplest thing in the world. We need time and we need space. That's all we need, time and space. If you have time and space, you can accept other people into that time and space. If you don't have it, it's not possible. Our world doesn't give us any time, doesn't give us any space, and we don't create a psychological space for ourselves. And by psychological space, what I mean is you're all in it. You're all in my psychological space. When you notice I look around, what I'm doing is getting feedback. You're not saying a word. There's a two-way conversation going on here. Laura's smiling because she's been at many of my classes over the years. And so is Christine. And so is Nadia. You're not saying anything, but I know exactly what's going through your heads. Yes, all of it. It's all right. It's all right because it's what goes through everybody's head when they come into a meditation class. And instead of just doing meditation, a meditation teacher says something like that. So I can accept anybody into my psychological space, and largely what they can do is take the top of their head off and out comes what's inside. And it's always the same. We're all ultimately underlying all of the dogma, the good and bad and right and wrong and fair and unfair. It's amazing how quickly people strip that away if you give them an opportunity. And then they're speaking about things that are actually just simple human connection things. Because if we have the space and the time, then what we do is connect. Always. Naturally. That's what we're designed to do. That's what we end up doing. So once you have space and you have time, you connect. It just happens. If you have space and time, you just need to walk around and you're allowing people into that space and time. In the United Kingdom, there's an ancient Roman road, but I believe it existed prior to that. It's called the Fosse Way, and it runs between the Severn and the Wash, in a kind of bottom left to top right. It's a straight road like Roman roads. And one of the most interesting things about it is this, is when you're on this side of the Fosse Way and you speak to someone at the bus stop, they'll freak out and move away from you and try and avoid speaking to you. Once you cross it, everybody talks to everybody else at the bus stop. Even if you're in cities. You sit on a train, sit on a bus, and the person next to you will talk to you. Remember that? We've all been there. And you also get that to a lesser extent, but it's still there in little villages in the southeast. Get into a little village. Towns, no. Cities, out the question. London, someone talks to you. What do they want? What sort of problems do they have? What's it about? So that what that means is in a big city, our space shrinks and we have no time. But we come to somewhere like this, and it's an opportunity for that to grow. So the self-care element of that is that you're designed to connect. And when you're not connecting, the more othering you do, the less you feel you can connect. The less you feel you can connect, the less you're doing for yourself. Because that's what you're designed to do. You've got all the systems, all the ability, all the desire to connect. And connection is meaningful and it's fulfilling. So in other words, you come away knowing something that you didn't know previously, and you come away feeling like you don't need anything else. All you need is to have that connection for that period of time, and that works. And you realise that if you had that all the time, many connections with many different people, then you'd be happy. But it's so difficult to do that. But the only reason it's difficult to do that is because of the barriers we put up. The process isn't an easy one of caring for ourselves, because that's what your human brain wants. It wants you to connect.
And that's why one of the most cruel punishments is solitary.
In a nutshell, if there's a line At one end of the line is solitary confinement, and at the other end of the line is connecting with as many people as you can possibly connect with. Notice the difference. At one end, what we're doing is fulfilling our natural drive to connect, and at the other end, it's being taken away from us. And the thing is, we're not in a place, we're always moving. We're either moving towards connection or towards suffering. If you're moving towards suffering, the first thing to do is stop. And this is a special magic tool that helps you do that. But you have to listen to it in a particular way. So there I am. If I'm moving towards suffering, for example, what we do is we get this magic tool. And to use it, all you need to do is close your eyes and listen to the sound that it makes, but in a very particular way. Listen to the sound as it moves through time. Notice all of the other sounds as well, but only use them as a way of noticing the movement of time. Okay, so now I've got some questions about the sound. So imagine you're at school and you want to answer the questions. There's no wrong answers, and I need as many answers as I can get. Just sound it a little bit. So, what's in the sound of the bell? Right, it's lessons time. What else is there? There's harmony. What do you notice in the sound of the bell? Comfort. Yeah. It's peaceful. Vibration. Musical note. Balance. What's not in the sound of the bell? Suffering. There's no suffering. Gone. Where did it go? It went in the present moment. You found the present moment. You're moving towards suffering. This is literally what happens. You're moving towards suffering. You find the present moment and it stops. And in that moment, you're able to choose what you do with your mind. What do I want to focus my mind on? The answer becomes obvious. More of that. But we can't carry bells. Well, we could carry bells with us everywhere. Easily get 2 seats on the bus. Get a whole carriage to yourself on the train. So what we need is something that's just like the bell, that's portable, that we can carry anywhere. This is what Eckhart Tolle, who's a great teacher of meditation in some ways, says, is that sound can be a portal, like a door, into the present moment. Here's another portal into the present moment, nature. Do you notice what happens when you walk into a park? Oh, just a little bit of suffering goes away. You can even do, if you've got a garden, you can see that in your garden. If you don't have a garden, you can be just walking past a patch of grass. And you're being brought into the present moment, which has none of fear, uncertainty, doubt, shame, guilt, resentment. It's not there. So it's not what's in the present moment, it's what isn't in there. But our awareness of the present moment has to be very fine, tiny. When you're focusing on this, you're focusing on a third of a second, 300 milliseconds. That's how long the present moment lasts. But as well as in the bell, you can notice it somewhere else. Fortunately, we've got a present moment portal that we take everywhere. And if you close your eyes and notice the movement of the belly, just at the point where the belly meets the chest, and you're noticing it rising and falling. It's actually the movement that we want to notice. The whole movement from the point that the belly's full all the way down to when the belly's empty, full, all the way down to empty, all the way back up to full again. So what I'll do is I'll sound the bell in time to my breathing, and you'll be able to see. And so now you're just able to notice the movement of the belly, and you're able to notice that what it's doing is moving through time. And when you stay focused on that movement, you're stepping into the present moment. And the mind might be chattering away in the background. It might be drawing your attention, your mind might wander. It might create scenarios, it might go over memories. None of that matters. Because the mind's a different thing than we're using here. What we're using here is our awareness. It's like an eye, the awareness. Sometimes we use our eyes to be aware, sometimes we use sound, our ears, and other times we use our body and we're noticing feelings. We're noticing the feeling of the belly rising and falling. and there are sounds, the sounds are only there to move through time. They have no other purpose. There are voices, you can't hear what they're saying. From time to time there's birds, somebody mowing the lawn. Movements in the room, sound of my voice. All it is something that's moving through time so that you can be aware of it. And it can help if you're seated, if you sit with your feet flat on the floor and you put your elbows by the side, and then you look for the most comfortable position to balance your head on top of your spine. That takes the stress in the body out of the equation a little bit, which reduces your anxiety a little bit and reduces the intensity of thought a little bit. And so we can maintain our attention on the rising and falling of the belly. The other thing you can do is also notice the breath in the nostrils, the coolness and warmth. That's whatever's easiest for you. So what we're going to do is, this is called following the breath. We're going to practice this for the next few minutes. And because the mind has a tendency to wander off, and then you're in a scenario and you forget that you're noticing the breath, every so often what I'll do is sound the bell. And that's just to help you to notice if your mind's wandered. You can come back and notice the movement of the breath. And the busyness of the mind doesn't matter at all. It can be chattering away non-stop through this, doesn't matter. This is just about the awareness and the breath. You don't even have to try it, stay focused, because if your mind does wander, I'll sound the bell. And you come back and notice the breath. We'll just practice this for a little while. It's been practiced for at least 2,600 years. It's called following the breath. whenever you're ready, in your very own time, gently return your attention to your surroundings. For years I taught mindfulness as a state. So this is like, you do this, that's mindfulness. Isn't it? Mindfulness is a process. I always knew it, but I was describing it in an unhelpful way. Mindfulness is the process of becoming aware that your mind has wandered, bringing your mind back to the present moment so that you have the choice about how to use it. And then your mind wandering again, noticing that your mind's wandered, bringing you, so it's a cyclical process, the whole thing. And it begins by you noticing that your mind's wandered. So what will have happened to everybody during that is that your mind will wander and you'll be in a scenario you've created in your imagination. Because you're sitting quietly, you're calm, you're relaxed. Mind creates a scenario. So there you are, you're in the scenario. You're talking to somebody or they're talking to you or you're going somewhere or something like that. And then Robert sounds the bell and you go, I'd rather notice my breath because there's no suffering there. So you come back and you notice the breath, you're noticing the breath, and then the mind wanders again. And Robert sounds the bell again. Each time you notice that your mind's wandered, it's called the moment of recognition. That's what I teach. Well, one of the things I teach. I teach a bundle of other stuff as well. But I teach people to realise, not to know it so they can write it down, but realise through experience that the moment of recognition is what we all want. That moment that you go, I'm in my mind and I want to come back here so I can choose how to use it. Very rarely do we go back to the scenario that we were just in. Interesting. We've got a choice. I've given you the choice. You've created the choice for yourself, actually. I just guided you to find the choice. Very rarely do you go, okay, right. Rather than being in the present moment, I'd rather go back to that scenario, no matter how wonderful the scenario is. Generally. Unless you're, in a sort of really breezy, wafty place with palm trees and sunshine and you're relaxed and you're happy, you might choose to go back to that one. But in the modern world, we don't spend much of our time there. And if we did, you get bored with it because it'd be the same wafty experience over and over again. So what we do is we come back to now, and the other thing is, of course, about how we choose to use our mind. There might be something critical that we need to focus on. And our mind's wandered, so we're not focusing on it. As an example, driving. So that's my new definition of mindfulness, is that which enables you to become aware that your mind has wandered, so that you can bring it back to now. And you can choose how to focus your mind. And an example of that is as Robert drives along, he realises that for the last 15 minutes he's been driving in the wrong direction because he's been driving to work. And he's actually not going to work today because it's a Saturday. He should actually be going to IKEA. But there he is. He's halfway to work. And he goes, moment of recognition, and changes course. He's not going to go, I'll go to work anyway. So we've all had that experience, you know. Here's another experience. Why am I at the fridge? Ever had that? Got the fridge open. Why am I here? You know why you're there. It's because your subconscious has said, feed me. You're not hungry either. That's the other thing. You're at the fridge. Or you walk from one room to another room. You get to the other room. You don't know why you're in the other room. So what do? Go back to the first room. Because you know you're not supposed to be in the second room. Somehow or another, the mind's caused you to go there. That aha moment, that's the moment of recognition. And to experience it, what you do is you practice this over and over again. Sit down, notice the breath, mind wanders, notice that the mind's wandered, bring it back. Thought doesn't come into this. Your thoughts could be rattling away. You could have recited the whole works of William Shakespeare in your head while this is happening, and it's not going to stop it. You're noticing the breath, your mind wanders, back to the breath, mind wanders, back to the breath. Big myth of meditation is that it's about thought. Even bigger myth that it's about silencing the thoughts. It's actually about becoming familiar with the thoughts and comfortable with them. And this is how we do it. But the benefit of noticing that your mind's wandered during your day is so great that that's a good first step on the process to becoming familiar with the mind. So all of this has got nothing to do with thoughts. So what we'll do is we'll do another meditation. And this, because you can't carry a bell around with you, and if you focus on the breath, you might find that you sit down and you meditate and your mind's wandered for the whole meditation, and you kind of feels like a waste. It isn't, because you're more familiar with your mind. Because the purpose of meditation is to become familiar with the mind. Meditation as a whole. Mindfulness meditation is any meditation that helps you to become aware that your mind's wandered so that you can bring your awareness back to now. That's the first step, mindfulness meditation. Meditation itself, the useful meditations, not the wafty ones that are just visualizations to make you feel better about everything. The meditations I teach, put it that way, the purpose of all of those is to help you become familiar with the mind. So in the absence of a bell, what we can do is count our breaths. So that's the 50% of people find this frictionless. So if you just get yourselves comfortable, to count your breaths, all you do is you use your inner dialogue, the inner voice, and as you breathe in, you count 1 on the in-breath, 2 on the out-breath, 3 on the in-breath, 4 on the out-breath, and you count up to 10. And when you get to 10, you begin at 1. When you lose count, you begin at 1. It doesn't matter if you lose count every single time. It isn't about getting to 10. It's about that process, noticing your mind's wandered and coming back to now. You want to train yourself to be able to do that in your day so you can choose how to use your mind. And you can also notice if you're driving in the wrong direction as well. So, counting the in-breaths and the out-breaths, 1 on the in-breath, 2 on the out-breath, 3 on the in-breath, 4 on the out-breath, up to 10. Get to 10, begin at 1. Lose count, begin at 1. So counting from 1 to 10 and coming back to 1 when we've finished, or if we lose count. Begin the meditation with a bell. This is many hundreds of years old at least. It's called counting the breath. again whenever you're ready, in your very own time. Gently return your attention to your surroundings. So for 50% of people that do that, their mind becomes calmer and the thoughts diminish. For the other 50%, the thoughts become more obvious. For everybody, they count, lose count, notice they've lost count, come back, start counting again. Everybody. Doesn't matter whether your mind's completely silent or whether there are a lot of thoughts. Yada, yada, yada. Doesn't make any difference. In both cases, you're familiar with the mind. So you do that for 5 minutes, you're 5 minutes more familiar with the mind than you were before you started. And you do that, 7 days and you're half an hour, and so every month you're 2 hours more familiar with the mind, and so it goes on. And that's how familiarity works. It's about time. More time you spend with the mind, the more familiar you are with the mind. The more familiar you are with the mind, the more comfortable you are with the mind. So the fact that the mind's chattering away, so I'm just referring to the half of you for whom the mind would have been busier doing that, that's okay. That chatter, you want to know. You want to know it's your mind, it's not going anywhere in a hurry. You want to get familiar and comfortable with it. And it's a fact of life that it's amazing what human beings can get comfortable with. Just read about the war, right? And so the more familiar you are with it, more you understand it. Get to know it. Funny little ways, quirky bits, helpful, destructive. All this. Every mind is self-destructive at some point or another. Don't let anybody fool you otherwise. And it's just a matter of getting to know that, getting comfortable with it. And all it's doing is it's doing what it wants. What it wants, just wants to connect. And the world don't let you because it's all broken. But what we'll do is fix it one day at a time by meditating. So that's your self-compassion and self-care. You find that time and you create that space for yourself, you're giving yourself what you need to connect. Because when you get rejected, and notice I say when, you're able to process that. Processing the inevitable rejection that comes from connecting to other people openly and honestly is one of the most useful things I teach. I'm teaching you all to be connection warriors. Go out, connect, get rejected, go out, connect, get rejected, go out, connect. But each time you do that, you become more familiar with your mind and other people's minds, yours more importantly, because you're the one that carries the baggage of the rejections. And you can let go of that. And this is the place it goes in here, in that present moment. That's there all the time. So we've shaped this copper into a bowl, but it's the emptiness inside that holds what we want. That's what we want. There's nothing in this present moment. We're finding that there's some experience that we can have that doesn't have our baggage in it. Through experience, we're training our brain, which is most difficult thing to do in the world, train ourselves. But we can only do it by repeating it. Even if you get what I'm saying, it counts for nothing. You have to repeat it to train your brain. Okay, so that's a kind of unusual take on self-compassion, but it is. That's the nub of it.